What was the last movie that you watched that there was a hero in it and it just resonated with you? We love heroes, we love stories, we love seeing people led, we love, for some of us, leading. And at the core of everything is that it helps us feel human in some ways. In movies, when we see the villain in a movie, we see the most logical person, right? They thought about it and we think about it like, man, Thanos was kind of right. And so we go down that route, but then we've got the hero who most times seems kind of just aloof and just lucky. And they do this for a reason. They want us in movies to resonate with someone that kind of resembles us in a way. And Tony Robbins shares a story about how there was this Olympian and she ended up hurting her leg. I think she broke her leg. And they were like, oh my God, she's going to go out there. She's going to do it. She's actually going to go out there. So she decided to go out there despite having a broken leg. And in that moment, the crowd was just in anticipation. They were on the edge of their seats. She does the performance. She sticks the landing. Everyone erupts in just cheer. And you felt one of two things in that moment: absolute pride and this sense of just, that's a part of me as a leader. Or it resonated with you in a different way. In that way that you were like, hey, there's a part of me I'm not living up to. And that's when you might be crying because you're so overwhelmed with just what happened. But these signals are so important for us to understand what it means to really truly be a leader and how that applies to how we build businesses and brands. And I love leadership. I love it. I love the growth of it. There was always, I've coached soccer teams. I coached women's soccer teams. There's a lot of things that I've done in leadership as a leader of my B-boy crew. I love seeing other people win. I love seeing other people. There's someone asked me one day, Just, what's your best quality? I was like, I can convince people to believe in themselves. That's what I love doing. And it helped me come to this place where I'm at today to share these things with you, these principles of the brand matrix, which is every single part of a business and what makes it thrive and get to that next level. And at the core of this is what I do, performance branding. At the core of the matrix is you, the leader, the entrepreneur, the executive who's leading your team, even director level. But here's the thing. You could be a janitor and still be a leader. Leadership is decided by everyone in your organization. It's decided by the people based upon the actions, convictions, and how you show up every single day. Leadership is not necessarily a learned trait, but it's something that you have to live every single day, because the most important thing you can do as a leader is make real sound decisions. That really is what it is. At the very top, the most important person in the organization is you, the leader, because you're going to determine where everything goes. And so when I talk about leadership, it's based upon my examples from years of doing this. So I'm going to break down these different segments of the brand ecosystem and the brand matrix on how you can extract out of every single one of these what's very valuable to pushing your brand to that next level. Now, this applies from small business startups all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. This is the framework that I've used when I was working with companies out in California. And some of these examples I'm going to have for you today on leadership stem from the leadership from the California companies I worked with and Miami companies as well. So in leadership, it's so important to have certain principles. It's communication is so key here, but we're looking at how we're going to go ahead and in this capacity work on our personal brand, because when we approach this, the way that I'm positioning this is that when you work on your personal brand, what you're saying is that I'm being intentional about how I show up, how I am remembered, my reputation. And it's important to do this because through personal branding, we want to make sure that our identity is different from the identity of the business. That way we can stand alone. You see this a lot of times with a lot of different CEOs. Now, you don't have to be Steve Jobs. You don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to be Jeff Bezos on that level of personal branding. It still works regardless of what size you're at. And the other things with leadership is it's about motivating the employees. It's about being emotionally intelligent and using empathy to communicate. And also, the big thing here is taking extreme ownership. One of the things that we're doing over at Sigma is that every man that comes into Sigma, the mental health organization, is they have to take complete ownership of their decisions. And they take ownership of everything else in their lives. We are all implicit and complicit in how we go through the world and how we show up, and only through extreme ownership. And Jocko talks about this, and he gets flown into companies to talk about just extreme ownership in itself. And then we also want to look at, are we being proactive as a leader? Because if we're being reactive, we end up creating more room for toxicity in the organization. We want to be proactive. We want to be ahead of the problems and make sure that we're taking care of situations. I would get phone calls and I would have to take care of something immediately, or I'd have to be on a plane in 2 hours to go from LA to New York to handle a situation. And we saw these things coming as a business. And it's so important to be proactive, to think a bit ahead. And we also need to figure out what our leadership architecture looks like. We need to have, for any business, the right people around us. One of the biggest things that you can do as a leader in your organization is cultivating the right leaders, the right partners. Now, this is one of the things we had to do in California when we were actually creating the different divisions. We had to make sure, even if we went through 100 different resumes, we had to make sure the decision we made was right, because that decision was going to affect our attrition rate, because it costs anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 depending on the position, just to retrain and replace that position. So we got to think about these things. And we also have to protect our time, making sure that we're managing our time as leaders and we're accounting for every single thing that we're doing and fine-tuning and dialing in where we can be most efficient. So these are some of the basic principles of leadership in building your brand. And if you guys have any questions about this, by all means, feel free, reach out. And I can go ahead and dive down even deeper in some of these ideas. But these are the principles that we need to live by, because when we have a clear vision of what we want, where we want, we instill confidence in the people that we're leading. Imagine that you boarded a ship and Jack Sparrow doesn't tell you anything. He's got his little compass, and that compass is guiding him. But if you are on that ship and you're expecting to hit land in a week, but it's going to take you a year, can you imagine just the emotional turmoil you're going to have from anxiety? This is why, as a leader, it's important to communicate clearly, effectively, and constantly. Always communicate, even if you feel like you haven't communicated enough, because communication is one part. The second part of communication is comprehension. So we have to unpack all of these to make sure that we are leading in the best way possible. So we'll come back to this after we've gone ahead and gone through the rest of the entire brand matrix silos, because I'm going to link back to these after I've covered them in at a high level, because they all interact with each other. This impacts the culture. Leadership impacts the business model. It impacts your operations model, every single component of this. And we want to have generals in every single one of these areas. So thank you for stopping by, as usual. I didn't have a sign off, guys. And so I definitely wanted to. All of these things are intertwined. And we're going to go ahead and break every single one of them down through the entire matrix, the podcast. Stay tuned as we unpack everything. That way you can own your power as a leader, build solid brands wherever you're at. I'll see you on the next one.